Thank you all for joining us in the Alpha Laval keynote speakers room. This chat is to start a conversation, hopefully, about Beer Australia, what it could be and what it might look like. This panel was started because if you ask GPT, one of those new technologies, what is Australia's drink? It comes back and says the answer is beer. But beer consumption has been steadily in decline for multiple generations now, despite the rise of craft beer. We're here to look forward to the future of beer, try and work out what it is and what it can be, and try how we can prevent beer from being used by the mainstream media as the picture whenever problem drinking is used and when burgers and dude food is being used. We want to put a positive face and work out what the future of beer is. To help us work through this challenge, we've got from the far end the chair of the Independent Brewers Association, Richard Watkins, Owen, Johnston, Sales and Marketing Manager for Hop Products Australia, Paul Daley, former craft beer ambassador, leader for Lion and current National Sales Manager for Benspoke, and also the founder of the Australian Cicerone community, and of course Bob Pease, President and CEO of the Brewers Association, to hear what we're doing there. Paul, I might start with you. You heard my introduction about beer. Why do you think beer is in decline, and why are we lagging behind the growth of some of the other drink categories?
Bring this over. Thank you. Well, generally just to acknowledge, obviously, that we know that alcohol in general has been in decline for a while, and we're currently fighting for, I guess, a slice of a shrinking market, or a slice of a pie that continually gets smaller and smaller. And I'll talk about the observations in terms of not just independent brewers, but also my observations the last 10 years with Lion or Kieran, the guys overseas. I feel that what we tend to do is we continue to struggle and grapple with the fact that we can't play in the occasions that Bob was talking about before. There's certain occasions where we struggle to always get to. What I've noticed, and this is a lot of it's anecdotal, is that we struggle with long-term goals and planning, and particularly even Lions struggle with long-term goals of planning in terms of advocacy and changing consumers' perceptions of the positive impact it can play in their lives as a adult beverage of choice. We will continually get usurped by another category through better marketing, but also particularly around showing what benefit can be with that one. I find that, and I've spent some time at Jim Beam too, a long time ago, the plans in place that our competitors put for long-term growth are very, very long. And they're very, very happy with the length of time it takes them to get that. Whereas I often, let's speak about to you, Matt, is we can as an industry be hyperactive, teenagers in terms of our planning and get distracted quite easy. If a plan doesn't work in 12 months or 18 months, we will drop it and we'll work something like that, or we'll work it off. We'll work onto something else. Beer the Beautiful Truth from Lion was a good example of that. There was millions of dollars of budget put into that one, but I just don't think it wasn't funneled into the right long-term sustainable actions, which could have a positive choice in showing you what beer can do with an occasion, whether it's a celebration or even how a different beer style can play. Because we know there's hundreds of different, more than 100 styles, but we really only play with 2 or 3 as a light lagers, pale ales, and I'll include IPA in that, but there's a massive breadth out there for that. So we can bring people who would like a premium occasion into beer, but I find that we struggle to get there, and when we can't find a path through a 12 or 18 month barrier, we invariably go back to quick dollars, and that is playing to the lowest common denominator. And there is a lot of people who like, or lowest common denominator, just in flavour, but particularly around how we market and how we how we showcase beer and reinforce the perceptions of people who are quick to criticise our industry by playing into that because it's an easy way to make some dollars.
Bob, we just heard your keynote, and you talked a lot about the challenging occasions from spirits that you can now have at baseball, which was once synonymous with beer. Also, your opening presentation included, and I wrote them down, we celebrate craft beer with one unified voice. We protect craft beer. What is the Brewers Association doing to promote and protect beer amongst that broader community?
Well, the purpose of the Brewers Association is to promote and protect American craft brewers, their beers, and the community of brewing enthusiasts. So that's kind of, a lot of people probably just equate that to a mission statement, but we call that our purpose. And on the promote side, I think the thing you can point to the easiest is our event called the Great American Beer Festival, which is the pinnacle of American craft beer culture in the United States from an event standpoint. It's coming up here in a few weeks, and it's in Denver, Colorado, every fall. This year we'll have about 500 breweries showcasing their beers on the show floor, which is certainly down from its most popular days. We'll sell about 30,000 plus tickets for 4 sessions over 3 days. Not anything to sneeze at, but again, down from where it was in its heyday. So, for us, that is where we celebrate American beer culture. And what we try to do with that event is raise the image of beer. And we do that, we raise the image of beer we'll have presentations from, say, somebody from the Cicerone program. We'll do we've had a lot of success with pairing beer and food and illustrating the compatibility of beer and food, kind of following in the footsteps of our friends in the wine industry. We'll do presentations at GABF where we'll have hop growers or hop producers come in and trying to illustrate the agricultural component of beer, the agricultural tie that beer has in the American agricultural community. I mean, where the American hop industry has gone due to the rise of American craft brewers is a real success story. So those are a couple of things on the promote side that we do. When we say protect, we're primarily talking about government affairs at the federal and state level, and then also what we call access to market. You heard me talk about some distributors in the United States are cutting back the number of SKUs they might carry from one of their supplier partners. So what we're trying to do is we are advocating at the state level, and unfortunately in the U.S., most government affairs battles are fought at the state level and not at the federal level, but we are very active in trying to work with what we call state guilds, which is the state equivalent of the BA, to legalize direct-to-consumer shipping for small brewers. In the United States today, and you guys will like this because of wine's prevalence and prominence here in Australia. In the United States today, wineries can ship interstate, so say from California to Colorado, to 46 different states to a consumer. I can order a case of wine in my house in Colorado from a winery in Washington State or California, or pretty much any state in the country, and have it delivered to my doorstep. For beer, that number is 11. Think about that. How the hell can that be? Well, that's because the power at government affairs at the state level is controlled by beer distributors. Beer distributors want a piece of every bottle, can, or pint of beer that is sold, and they work really hard against us to prohibit us from having that right and that access to market. So protecting those rights or developing those rights for our members that's be one example of how we try to protect the beer industry.
At the same time, at the Great American Beer Festival, for the first time this year, I believe, you'll be allowing brewers to have non-beer products.
You caught that. Very good.
Which seems a pragmatic concession to the change in the markets. And I was also your current chair, your equivalent of Richard. I was at a panel 4 years ago in Denver where it was the summer of seltzer, and we had the first waves of seltzer coming along, and Garrett Marrero from Maui Brewing said quite proudly that he was embracing seltzer because he got into this industry because he just wanted to make cool shit. And that was his quote.
Sounds like Garrett.
If we're going to concede to pragmatics, how do we, how does the Brewers Association both allow other products in and say that we're promoting beer?
Great, great question. I'll take the Great American Beer Festival example first. When you're running a consumer-oriented event like the GABF that has 30 or 40,000 ticket buyers, you potentially need to make some concessions for what you believe your Bible to be in order to remain commercially relevant to the ticket buyer. We know that younger consumers of beverage alcohol are exploring what we would call alternative adult beverages. To not offer them that opportunity seems to be maybe cutting off our nose to spite our face a little bit. So we are dipping our toe in the water to see what type of interest there'll be from the ticket buying public on drinking other beverages other than beer at the Great American Beer Festival. Another thing we're doing at the Great American Beer Festival this year that we haven't been successful at getting the word out is we're going to have a small international beer pavilion as well. So we're working with a beer distributor in Colorado, Elite Brands. It handles some of the more iconic imports from Germany, Belgium, and the UK. And we're going to have a small pavilion with about 25 different brands, but some really, St. Bernardus, Westford. So it'll be interesting to see if that spurs interest as well.
Some Australian beers, perhaps?
Maybe next year. Yeah. So that's kind of on the GABF side. On the association side, which like this, but not necessarily like that. We're having serious conversations at the board level about, should we be focused on supporting small and independent business or small and independent breweries, or perhaps both? Garrett at Maui, that's a good example of they make pretty much everything under the sun. They make beer, they make spirits, they make seltzers, they make coffee. And that's, what he sees as his path to being a well-rounded independent business. He has multiple restaurant breweries in Hawaii. So I think where we're going to end up is, and, don't quote me on this, but I'm just kidding, supporting the independent business first is probably going to be a direction you see the association lean into in the future.
Richard, speaking on behalf of the Brewers, the IBA, the Independent Brewers Association, is that a model that we should be looking at, or is the IBA looking at building a protection around the idea of beer?
Good question, because we haven't really actually explored this.
That's what we're exploring.
Look, at the moment, I think the IBA is focused on protecting our independent breweries, all the members out here today. That's what we're number one about. What we can do to help support all our independent breweries is lift the amount of beer that's being sold in Australia. And if we need to help to work together with the bigger breweries to be able to talk to government as one entity, because the government only wants to listen to one entity, they don't want to listen to two or three, because they're all federal laws that we're looking at trying to get help with. Then if we lift the percentage of beer sold in Australia, we're all going to win. I don't think we're quite at that stage where we're going to deviate from supporting independent breweries. But, who knows where this will go, and our members will decide how all this is going to work.
Owen, looking at the ingredients, the things that make beer, the early days of craft beer, the thing that probably fired a lot of the passions in this room to leave probably better paying jobs to make beer was the statement of craft beer: malt, water, hops and yeast. We heard yesterday Bernard Salt talking about the compelling story to consumers, but also to government, that we can tell through ingredients as an agricultural product. As an industry, have we done that well to date? Have we told the story of our ingredients?
Thanks, Matt. Actually, picking up on something that Bob said this morning, I think to answer that question, it's important to go back a little bit and understand where we are at the moment. And thank you. the celebration of ingredients in beer isn't new. It has been done before. In fact, one of our farm managers had his face all over billboards in Melbourne for a period there, courtesy of CUB, and we've never let him forget that. I think the question is correct. Have we done a good enough job? And if we're talking about creating a compelling story for a category of Australian beer and helping sell more beer, I think the ingredient story is an opportunity. And I think if you could just move the consumer's dial just a little bit toward a beer that celebrates 100% Australian ingredients, for example, it's a game of millimetres shifting that buying decision. And if the ingredient story can work to achieve that, then we've achieved something to contribute to a compelling brand story. And I'd ask, the audience to sort of contemplate your own brand and comms mix, and how do you celebrate ingredients, and do you name them up, and is there space for a celebration of provenance from Australian ingredients? Because I think in the Australian, and back to Bernard Salt, I think in the Australian consumer, they're all concentrated on the eastern seaboard. There's a lot of lifestyle in there. I reckon there's a big portion of those who have never grown a single vegetable themselves. And I think the Australian psyche wants to support Australian agriculture. I think it is meaningful for people. It might be quite subliminal, but I think in terms of layering in a compelling Australian brand story into beer, the ingredient story really can contribute.
Paul, where is beer now? Do you see it? It's always been the Australian drink. Bernard Salt talked about it was the beer that there was a beer for the country, there was a beer for the working person, there wasn't a beer for the beach, was I think his summary. Has craft beer moved the dial, or has craft beer become, a limit in what beer can be seen as?
I think that as the slide that Bob put up before, we saw 42 in the 1970s, and what craft beer has shown is that it's opened up as an opportunity to show the world that beer can be so much more than Miller Lite or Tooheys Extra Dry or those like. So it's opened up. It is a lot more, and craft beer has done that. And the big guys, so obviously I was a part of, we wanted to buy into that, so we bought that. A risk is that if we come down on another side on the other side, we've had a lot of fun doing what we do, everyone celebrated, everybody got into the market, is that we might have missed an opportunity for long-term sustainability in changing the consumer's idea of what it can play, the lifestyle. So you mentioned that the Australian Cicerone community is something that I came into of thinking about for a while now. In doing that was with that program fully focuses on the demand side of advocacy as opposed to the supply side of advocacy, because we all know in this room we've got amazing brewers, and we've done so much as a craft beer industry and a beer industry over the last 15 years to make sure the beer is perfect when it gets to the consumer. But right now we can brew all the beer we want, but there's no one buying the beer, or less people buying the beer. So the opportunity, what craft beer has done an amazing work to get to this point, but for some reason there's something that we've missed along the way to have had a consumer go, now I'm going to go buy, the dirty word of the room is hard solo, but we'll use as an example, right? Or seltzer, or some things that, again, I'll say play to a low common denominator. I find it hard to believe that people want less flavour, or because people still want to drink Negronis, or they drink challenging cocktails and alike. And the MasterChef revolution has shown us that people are after new, interesting, flavourful. So the demand's there, but there's something we've missed for people now to go, I don't want that. And look, price, the retailers in the room and the venue owners, price obviously plays a massive component of that. But you look what Bernard said yesterday, we're a darn lucky country and we're in a great economic position going forward. But there is a part missing. So, without going to the other people's experts, the way that I want to try and make a contribution, and this is when Bob said the way I want to give back to an industry is with the community. What I'm doing is help people understand that if we can lift up that experience at the point of purchase of the interaction with the consumer and give them an elevated experience in terms of showing them more of what beer can be, showing them the functional benefits it can play in social situations. If we can broaden out that area of when we have an interaction with someone, making sure we always leave a positive impact, and that might mean we have to watch sometimes how we convey as representatives of the industry. If we can fatten out that area and get them to buy one more pint before they move on to glasses of wine, or we can introduce them to know that there are wild beers out there or variations of beers that can really play into that natural wine category. We have all the tools, but there's a messaging that we've missed, and there's probably a collective pulling in the same direction. And I think that's a positive attribute of what the conversation is now about an organisation that could assist with pulling all people in that, but it has to have everyone on board. And, well, I'll probably stop talking on that part there.
Following on from that, Bob, I was very inspired. I was never, unfortunately, a young beer writer. I was an inexperienced beer writer, but 20 years ago, I was very inspired by the rhetoric that was coming out of America, that we're not going to drink that fizzy yellow lager, we're not going to drink that garbage. 20 years later, if I see somebody drinking a beer, even if it's a light lager, I'm happier than seeing them drink a sweet, fake fruit-flavoured ethanol can. I've also seen the rhetoric of the Brewers Association change, and I saw you on stage with the head of the Brewers Institute, which was once upon a time the enemy. Should we be looking at what unites us first and getting people to drink first and then start fighting over the market share? And is that the approach you're taking in the US?
I think what you're referring to are the days of I Am a Craft Brewer,
yes.
Put together by my good friend Greg Cook, formerly of Stone Brewing Company. For me, that message fit the times perfectly. But the only constant in life is change, right? Things change. I tell my staff all the time, for example, every board of directors that we have is different. So the current board, led by Garrett and Leah and other folks on that slide I showed, are a whole lot different than when it was Kim Jordan, Gary Fish, Steve Hindy, Ken Grossman, Nick Matt, Vinny Salurzo running the board. Nothing stays the same. So short answer to your question, Matt, is yes. All beer is good. We are working more closely in the United States with the large brewers on things that unite us. And we find that we have a lot more things in common than we do than things that drive us apart. That doesn't mean we're lockstep on everything. We recently submitted, chapter and verse to the U.S. Tax and Trade Bureau and the Department of Treasury, the regulatory bodies for beverage alcohol, on trade practices. And, we take the big brewers to task for their, what we view as predatory and, frankly, illegal trade practices in the market. Now, we agree to disagree on that. But, yeah, we are working more closely with the Large Brewers Trade Association than ever before. I would say our relations with the beer distributors are, while improved, they're not as strong as they are with the large brewers. And, just look at that example I use with direct-to-consumer shipping. Why shouldn't you be able to order a case of beer at home if you can order a case of wine? It's just, it's maddening for us that they stand in our way on that. But yeah, beer is under threat in our country, under your country, but also it's beverage alcohol that I think is under threat. Beer's been around for 9,000 years, okay? Beer's not going anywhere. I still think the best days of craft brewing in the United States are ahead of us, and I think the best days of craft beer and craft brewing in Australia are ahead of you. There's cycles in business, there's cycles in consumer lifestyle trends. We have to stand fast, weather the storm, and come out stronger on the other side.
How about you, Rich? We're at the Independent Brewers Association conference. Is it more important that we get people drinking beer and then fight for independence, or do we do this alone?
I don't think we can do it alone, simply because the way the government works in Australia, they're just not going to listen to us. You know, we need to have a united voice. I mean, this is how the whole Wine Australia thing started back in the day, because the wine industry was in a terrible situation, and they managed to band together and fight for a common cause in wine, and now they get $55 million a year to grow and strengthen the wine industry in Australia. I'm sure the little wineries still fight the big ones, and we've still got some big fights to take to the big guys, you know, namely tap contracts. It's what our members want us to look into, and we're going to put a plan in place to do that. And that's not working together. So I always see that there's a place for the BA separately to the IBA in all of this. I think we're miles away from ever being one group. But I think it's important that, as I said just earlier, that if we can stop the decline of beer sales and just stop it and let it plateau, we're all going to win. If we then can grow it, well, there's not enough stainless steel in Australia to make the beer we need. So we want to go back to that situation.
Are we mature enough to work together on those things and fight them? There were some fairly punchy comments made in Parliament recently about tap contracts and the battles that we're going to fight there. Are we mature enough to have those two ideas and at the same time?
Absolutely. I think we've got a pretty good working relationship with the BA at the moment. Kylie's done a lot of work with the chair of the BA. You know, we had a seat at the table the other day with the Distillers Association, the BA, when we were talking in front of the Teals, and they were happy for us all to be in the one room. I think there's a lot we've got in common, absolutely. But there's also lots we don't have in common, and I don't see us, you know, getting it all together very, very quickly.
One of the things, this idea of Beer Australia, which is just two words at the moment, it's an idea that has been coming back, is concern that it's just another body to take up funds. So I'll go across the panel and start with you, Paul. What, in the perfect world, if you were the chairman of beer in Australia, what would Beer Australia be?
Have to sit
Is
up
it
straight
an
now that I'm
idea? Is it
chairman
a
of beer.
campaign? Is it a committee? Is it a body?
This is a very big question. Well, first of all, I'd have a marketing campaign like Lamb Australia, because I can't ever forget that. It's great. That's tongue-in-cheek. Look, without I guess that's a very strategic view for someone with much more of a strategic mindset than mine, because I like to play in my niche. It'd be multifaceted in the sense that a Beer Australia, for me, idealistically, from a bias point of view, would have very much a view of consumer strategy and outward looking, how we can change the perceptions for a consumer to choose us more often. I'm not involved in the IBA, apart from my new pin that I felt that I was now obliged, after 3 months from the big guys, to now put on for the IBA, so thank you very much, team. But it is, the Brewers Association in Australia is very much around lobbying. You don't see them. They are the most powerful group of brewers who can hold government conversations, but the consumer wouldn't have an understanding of who they are. They're purely there to, you know, fight on Capitol Hill, but fight on Parliament. And the IBA, and this is obviously, we're here with an IBA item as well, you know, the advocacy and the education perspective is still very much forward towards the brewers and the technical people here. For me, a Brewers Association, or sorry, a Beer Australia, would be talking directly outward looking at a marketing and consumer demand perspective to them, and giving them a reason to actually pick up our product or beer in general before they pick up someone else's. And the investment would be very much towards that, because that's, and again, this is where I put my time and my give back to the beer community, is based around that, because I see it's a massive missing link for that. For me, that's what I like the idea of a Beer Australia is invested in that. And look, as an IBA, we can invest in that ourselves, but as 7.3% of the market, it's very hard to change, 7.3, somewhere in there. It's very hard to change a consumer's perspective and that mass scale. We can't do that without Lion and CUB. and they have to be fully invested behind it as well. And it's hard to get them because they've tried and failed in the past, but they haven't managed to break the chains of how do we get into more occasions, stimulate more demand without falling back to 6.5% to his extra dry and bringing back, nostalgic things which are there for a functional quick fix at a price point which does nothing to get beer to someone who doesn't drink it currently right now. It plays into lowest common denominator, the people who are playing on nostalgia, smash them cans, and irresponsibility I find in a lot of those parts too. We need them to come on board and see that long-term sustainability industry is built on working all together with trying to grab a slice of the bigger pie, of a shrinking pie, but obviously still keeping to our base. So consumer demand and advocacy is absolutely the biggest positive that I see, and that is going to lift everybody up from doing so.
Owen, where do you see Beer Australia as being?
Yeah, I really like that, and I think it's close to my vision of what success might be for this compelling story that is Beer Australia, and that would be a victory in the mindscape of consumers, and that is broader than just the Australian drinker. I think there is a role for recognition of Australia's attributes and difference, whether that's resonating with this lifestyle thing that Australia has, or whether it's a celebration of the raw materials that are Australian grown. If you're in an Asian market, be it Singapore or Korea or Japan, and the consumer can already have an impression of something that is a Beer Australia product in their market, then that would be immensely successful. But I do like your thoughts around the long game here, and that will be quite a journey to establish that. I think again back into the way ingredients can contribute to that story. We are in a very unique position here in Australia to leverage the ingredient story into a brand identity that's bigger than just the one producer here and there. We are one of few countries in the world that grow hops. And we have very high quality barley and very well-credentialed maltings. We're right on the front foot. We actually have the fundamentals to create an ingredients layer in a compelling brand story. So
we have the best water in the world too.
Absolutely.
Some of the best.
Rich, what's your vision for a Beer Australia?
Oh, look, I'm just simply going, well, beer's, as I've just said a few times, beer's declining, and we've got to stop it declining. We all win if we stop it declining. So my vision is that Beer Australia would be a vehicle for, selling the compelling story of beer, and we have to do it all together. That's my feeling on it. And I think if we can sell a compelling story, we can then layer in after that the great story of independent beer, separately to Beer Australia.
I guess I want to throw it open to the room now. This is your association, this is your conference, and most importantly, this is your industry. Does anybody have any thoughts about what Beer Australia could be to you, or do you have any questions for the panel? Karina?
I very much like what Paul has said. I think while advocacy at the government level is absolutely important, it is a must that we're reaching the consumer. And coming back to Bob, to your presentation, so obviously beer is on the decline, but the total alcohol isn't on the decline. It has been sidetracked by many of the other beverages. So that defies somehow a little bit that concept that we are more health conscious. But we've had a generation from during COVID where 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds didn't go to the pub, they couldn't go out. A lot of them couldn't go out, so they've almost graduated seamlessly from the Coca-Cola to another sweet alcoholic beverage. So I think that going to the consumer, giving them a reason to make beer their choice beverage when they go out is most probably my vision of a Beer Australia strategy.
Anybody else? Because just picking up on that, one of the things that I've always heard from brewers, and the big brewers particularly, in a mindset that I think activated the craft brewing industry, is we'd seen the bitterness of beer decline over generations, particularly as soft drink and fruit juices attuned younger palates to those products and away from beer. There's obviously a lot more than just a brand perception of beer. There's a flavour profile of beer. How do we address that? What do we do to make beer more positive for drinkers? Again, and we heard from ABAC yesterday, we can't target young drinkers. How do we engage them in a way that makes beer aspirational, makes beer, more popular for drinkers who are coming through, who just want a sugar hit with a bit of ethanol in?
Well, I have a pretty clear opinion of that, and it's a bit tongue in cheek, but I think there's some rationale behind it. We actually need to double down on what makes beer different from sweeter, low BU, for instance. So none of you in the room will be surprised to hear me say that we need more hops in beer, because
balanced with a nice malt body.
Of course, Australian malt body, right? But if marketing is all about segmentation, we shouldn't be trying to make... Okay, so the craft mandate is choice and diversity back to drinkers, right? To really move away from that macro, yellow, fizzy phase, okay? That's fine, but one of the few chinks in the macro armour there is that, for instance, Bud Light is down at 8 BU or something like that. They've been moving that down and down and down. Well, I think it's a really important pillar in segmentation and understanding what we offer is actually not to slide those BUs down. And I'm not trying to suppress choice. There's all beer for all occasions, but the role of ingredients does become really important.
Bob, that's a nice segue. You talked about...
We're not going to talk about Bud Light, are we?
No. But you talked about in the face of spirits. Spirits marketing has been a new thing, but that opens the advantage of beer. Has always been the drink of moderation, and how big an opportunity is that? I remember seeing posters from the 1940s where beer was marketed as an agricultural... So we've almost gone back to the future where beer was the choice of moderation, it was the agricultural product. Should we just pull out some of those posters from 70 years ago?
Why not, right? History repeats itself. At the Brewers Association, we fall back on some of our taglines, such as flavor and diversity. Mm-hmm. Elevating the image of beer, trying to challenge beverage alcohol drinkers that we say, I don't like beer, and then you pivot from that saying, well, tell me what do you like, what flavors do you like, and if you can get someone who can describe what they like, you can almost always find a beer style that could meet their expectations of what they're looking for in beverage alcohol. We've had a lot of success doing that with sours. That kind of has come and gone, but that for a while, that was a real success story for us. Interestingly, to hear the discussion about Beer Australia, the Brewers Association has worked with the Beer Institute, who represents Anheuser-Busch InBev, Molson Coors, Constellation, and Heineken in the U.S., and also the National Beer Wholesalers Association, on trying to put together a consumer-oriented generic campaign to promote all beer. Stops and starts. We had something going that was fairly compelling pre-COVID. COVID put it on the back shelf, but there is an example of a success story that for a campaign like that took place in the UK. That I forget the exact name of the campaign, but it stemmed the decline of beer. It was not successful necessarily in terms of growing beer. I think it was funded to the tune of about £10 million a year for 5 years. It was all funded by the large brewers, but the small brewers, the craft brewers in the UK, SIBA, Society of Independent Brewers Association, and the British Pub and Brewers Association, they all participated. And so it can be done. for the brewer in the U.S. I think our campaign was called "There's a Beer for That," or maybe it was "Here's to Beer." I can't even remember. It's crazy, but it was going to be brand agnostic, but showcasing the diversity of styles, and where it kind of got what it ended up also derailing that was when the primary funders were AB InBev and Molson Coors, and then there was this thing called Corngate. I don't know if you guys remember that, when the high fructose corn syrup advertising during the Super Bowl, and Molson Coors and ABI went into litigation. So that pretty much torpedoed that effort to work together. But it can be done, and there's conversations now on what something might look like in the future in the United States.
Paul, you've alluded to this, if I've heard you correctly, and my deaf ear is towards you, but we're an industry that celebrates that it's an egalitarian product, that it's the every person's drink, that it's not meant to take itself too seriously. But at the same time, I get very upset when I see food and wine trails and food and wine events, and beer is never included in that. Do we sometimes over-celebrate the shoey and the shotgun in the
or the dad bod competition
and the dad bod competition in the name of not taking ourselves too seriously, but in doing so bring the tone of the conversation that we can have down?
Yeah. Beer should never lose its fun, its working class, its reward for effort put in, and I think that's extremely important for beer to have. I was thinking just then, as I was talking, my mind was ticking over. I think with the perception of beer and why it's excluded from those areas, at the moment, a lot of the advertised and a lot of the public perception of beer is the result and the pure influence of individual marketers from the brands that they're particularly looking after at that time. So your perception of beer will be because there's a campaign from 4X or a campaign from VB or a campaign from whoever has the biggest budget to go again to where they're going to sell the most product. So beer's perception in the community is what we're told by a marketer. And look, there's marketers in the room, but there's marketers who might have a campaign that targets one specific person, but forever it is always associated with that one. So as opposed to what Bob was talking about, if we have something that is more of a collective campaign that projects where we want to see beer in the future, short, medium, long term, we would probably have confidence that we can change the perception of beer for it to then find place more commonly, a common place that's acceptable in premium occasions, celebrations, sitting down, putting the can, instead of putting the can down next to the barbecue and going and having the meal with the family and getting out the glass of wine, beer will still come there, and it's a 750ml bottle of wild fermented alembic, or a locally grown one, a locally produced variation of what would be commonly seen as alembic overseas.
I'd be happy if it was a cracking pilsner.
A cracking pilsner, yeah, perfect. but in saying that, there's a lot of beers out there. But again, that's just it. Everything that you see that's above the line, that's in a bus stop poster that comes on at halftime in the AFL Grand Final, is a vision of beer made by a marketer for a brand that then represents a whole category, because a lot of those marketing campaigns do that. There was one from a former independent brewer recently that was actually quite good for beer, I thought. But yeah, I think that's probably a big issue with us, and possibly an organisation that we're all going in the one direction, and we do have funding, and we can bring the level and the standard of how we communicate beer on a above-the-line mass communication level. I think that is a really lofty but important goal to actually look to achieve, because at the moment, maybe the people who are marketing and having the influencers, they might not be there for the long term in beer, but might be invested in beer as we are, because it's just a pit stop on the road to a career somewhere else.
Look, I'm just very mindful of time, so I just wanted to finish by just gauging the feelings in the room. Sorry, Adam Tripp-Smith, you've got a question? Is there
maybe a statement?
A statement?
I'll shout. So we've had a lot of talk, but I think we need to move to action. And what I'd like to see is, representing this room, the IBA engaged with the three majors and have a talk about Beer Australia, because I don't think it's the BA. BA is purely government and political, representing the three brewers. To me, it's old-fashioned advertising to the consumer, which is where we're going. But I think we need to take the next step and engage with the three major producers of beer, with the IBA representing this collective group, just because individually we're not large enough to have that say, but Richard, on behalf of everyone, can, around that notion of starting that consumer advertising body, nothing to do with government. And we're lucky that we don't have the distribution model that the US has, so we've got no barriers like that. When we talk about tap contracts, the beauty is about taps, it's mostly beer at the moment, but there's a swing away from beer on taps, and if we lose that, I don't think Beer Australia can save us from that.
Funnily enough, there's a whole move towards, apparently hard solo is going to go on tap. We're going to see cocktails on tap, and they're not going to come from the contracted taps. They're going to come from our taps, sorry, your taps. So to pick up on that, I guess I'd love to just hear a round of applause if people in the country, if people in this room support the idea of a Beer Australia or a campaign that elevates beer. So I guess that's the start, but this is, as I've said a couple of times, this is your conference and this is your association, and Kylie Lethbridge at iba.com.au. Matt at brewsnews.com.au, and I'll forward it to the correct email address, which is saved in my calendar. Let us know what you think it could take, but I think, you know, to Adam's comment, the big brewers have the dollars, but with 650 breweries across the country, we have the reach and we have the hearts of communities, and I think those two things working together provide a very, very powerful argument both to government and to consumers for Beer Australia. So I think that's as good a time to empty it.
Yeah, I'll just say, look, it's good to see that our membership does want us to look at this. I think that was a real important piece, certainly for me, but also for the whole IBA team. We want to act on behalf of our members. We want to make sure whatever we do, our members want us to progress and do that. So it's really gratifying to see that everyone's committed to trying to get something together to lift beer. I'm going to say Kylie's well overdue a holiday, so she's going to have a holiday after this. And when she gets back from holidays, we'll have a chat about where we go.
We're all at Brew Economy tonight as well, so anyway.
Yeah, if anyone's got any concerns or wants to chat more privately about this, feel free to reach out to any of the board members, myself as well. Happy to chat a lot more on this because I do really believe in it.
Wonderful. Well, Richard, Owen, Paul and Bob, thank you very much for being part of this discussion.